Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This week, we're going to be covering the last of the key brief therapy modalities for this class. So, we are going to be talking about interpersonal psychotherapy and time-limited dynamic psychotherapy. So, let's go ahead and start off with interpersonal psychotherapy, or IPT. So, interpersonal psychotherapy, or IPT, is based off the importance of relationships and looks at alleviating a client's problems and challenges by improving their interpersonal relationships and support systems. By improving interpersonal relationships, change happens through a client's attachment needs being met. IPT has been around for a while and its effectiveness is well studied. It's been shown to be highly effective in treating mental health disorders that manifest with depressive symptoms. So, disorders such as geriatric depression, adolescent depression, dysthymia disorder, bipolar disorder, and postpartum depression. It's really a great therapy model to use within group settings as well, with couples and in family practice. So IPT has four primary elements that encompass the model. First is that IPT focused specifically on interpersonal relationships and believes that psychological symptoms are due to interpersonal distress or the inability to change their expectations of relationships. Second is that IPT utilizes an interpersonal conceptualization of distress. So this means that a client's strengths and weaknesses can be understood through a client's biological, psychological, social, cultural, and spiritual vulnerabilities. Understanding is one part of making sense of how these factors affect distress. The other part is helping the client meet their attachment needs through social support. IPT is its foundations are based in attachment theory, which understands that adaptive mental health is built on flexible, secure attachment with others. The third element is that IPT is a time limited uh, modality during acute treatment. So, unlike other traditional psychoanalytic models where termination of the treatment means severing completely of the therapeutic relationship, the therapeutic relationship isn't severed once acute treatment is completed. IPT is time limited only in the acute phase. So, we're talking about the first 8 to 12 weeks typically. From there, the interval between sessions is increased. So once the acute phase has been completed, the client and therapist typically agree to have sessions in the future as needed. And then the fourth element of IPT is that IPT refrains from directly addressing the transference relationship. When we say transference, we're talking about the way in which the therapeutic relationship develops and is maintained. So in IPT, the therapist wants to understand how the client relates to others in their social relationships through the transference relationship, but doesn't always address it directly in therapy. So, for example, let's say a client forms a dependent relationship with their therapist. Um, they are calling the therapist between sessions and they're making it really difficult to wrap up sessions weekly. This could indicate to the therapist that the client might relate to others in their social environment with similar dependent tendencies. This is important information for the therapist to have because they can use that to understand a client's interpersonal difficulties. But in IPT, um, again, this should not be addressed directly with the client in therapy sessions. So, along with the structured approach to the treatment process, where there's an initial assessment phase, which is 1 to 3 sessions, and then middle or immediate sessions, which is 4 to 12 sessions, and then concluding sessions, so 1 to 2 sessions to wrap up, and then the maintenance phase. There are techniques that are utilized throughout the IPT treatment process that are specific to IPT and some that are found within just traditional psychotherapeutic methods. So the traditional techniques are ones such as exploration and clarification of challenges, building a good therapeutic alliance, and problem solving. And then some of the specific techniques to IPT are interpersonal incidents and communication analysis. So, an interpersonal incidents, they're descriptions by the client of specific interactions with their significant other. As you can imagine, this works really well in couples therapy. So, for example, let's say you're working with a couple and they have a specific interaction where the dispute between them typically results in yelling and arguing. To begin understanding what happens in these interactions, the therapist might ask something like, describe the last time you and your partner got into an argument, or tell me about one of the more recent big fights you had with your partner. So once a therapist gains an understanding of the miscommunication and factors contributing to the incident, they can move to the communication analysis, in which the communication between the client and their partner is broken down and examined in detail. So they look at communication patterns that can be identified there that way, and just being able to change behaviors and communication patterns can be helped by the client connecting with their emotions in therapy and understanding their affective state in that response. So, for example, a therapist might ask the client, tell me how you're feeling right now as you're describing how you yelled at your partner during your last fight. Having completed a thorough communication analysis and exploring the client's affective states, probably from there you would problem solve ways to generate change and devise strategies for better communication from there. All right. I know I'm kind of going through these pretty quickly, but there's a lot of information for both these type of modalities. And we're going to move on to time-limited dynamic psychotherapy. And I'm going to go ahead and let you know that this chapter is pretty information dense. So I'm going to try to highlight the areas that are most pertinent to understanding time-limited dynamic psychotherapy on how it relates to our understanding of brief therapy and some of the major principles that make up the foundational assumptions of this brief therapy model. So, as we discussed in the beginning weeks, psychodynamic therapy is typically longer and isn't considered a short-term or brief therapy, but time-limited dynamic psychotherapy, or TLDP, has been designed to be brief and also uses a traditional dynamic approach. So, similar to interpersonal therapy, TLDP addresses the interpersonal experiences of the client along with intrapsychic aspects of experiences. So unlike some of the other brief therapies we've discussed in class, the focus of TLDP is not necessarily on the reduction of symptoms, but more so changing ingrained patterns of how the client relates and attaches to with others and with themselves. So there's some differences that present themselves when comparing brief psychodynamic therapy versus longer term dynamic therapy. The 10 distinct factors of time limited dynamic psychotherapy, but not these are ones that are not necessarily found in longer term dynamic psychotherapy are limited therapeutic focus and goals, time management of the sessions, selection criteria of clients, the therapist activity within the therapeutic process, the importance of fostering a therapeutic alliance quickly, which, as we've learned, is a common need of all brief therapy modalities, rapid assessment and prompt intervention, termination, optimism, as brief therapy really requires a glass is half full kind of mentality, and contracts between the therapist and client of the scope and length of treatment, and modifications of psychoanalytic techniques and concepts. There's some more great in-depth explanations of these factors in your book. So I want to make sure we cover the major principles of TLDP as they guide and provide context to TLDP. The 9 basic principles are that people are innately motivated to search for and maintain human relatedness. This is where attachment theory comes into play. Think of how an infant has an instinctive need to form an attachment with a caregiver. Next is maladaptive relationship patterns and their attendant emotions are learned early in their life. They become schematized and underline many presenting complaints. So this means that an adult's relationship challenges with others stems from early experiences as a child with their caregivers. Next is maladaptive relationship patterns and their attendant emotions are maintained in the present. This means that these interpersonal challenges that someone presents with as an adult, although it's learned early in their life as a child, these dysfunctions are still being maintained and supported in their current life. A lot of times, this process is unconscious. And then next, patients are viewed as stuck, not sick. So this is the understanding that clients are doing the best with what they have. They understand their world with, what they've learned in life through their relationship with their attachment figures and their environment. Next is the focus is on shifting maladaptive relationship patterns and attendant emotions. So from a TLDP perspective, the client can provide valuable information about their internal working models in both what they say and how they say it. Next is the therapist is both a participant and an observer. This means that the therapist acts as both a participant in the therapeutic process for the client, where they're really involved emotionally, as well as an observer of the therapeutic process, where they're presenting as the expert and using more stated processing with the client. Next is TLDP focuses on intrapersonal and interactive processes rather than content. This means that TLDP isn't necessarily concerned with what the client's disruptions, challenges, and problems are about, but more so what's behind it. What are the attachment fears, the internal processes happening within the client and within the client's relationships to others? And then next, TLDP focuses on one chief problematic relationship pattern. So TLDP looks for the most pervasive and problematic interpersonal pattern in the client's life. And treatment is really focused on that one problematic style of relating. Lastly, the change process will continue after therapy ends. So this is the belief that you don't come in and you change your maladaptive patterns and then you're done. TLDP believes therapy starts the application of learning new adaptive interpersonal behaviors, and that learning opportunities to integrate these in their lives will continue after therapy. All right, that's all we have for this week, and I will see you all soon. Take care.